The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to St. Mark. James and John, the sons of Zebedee, came forward to Jesus and said to him, "Teacher, we want you to do for us whatever we ask of you." And Jesus said to them, "What is it you want me to do for you?" And they said to him, "Grant us to sit, one at your right hand and one at your left, in your glory." But Jesus said to them, "You do not know what you are asking. Are you able to drink the cup that I drink, or to be baptized with the baptism with which I am baptized?" They replied, "We are able." Jesus said to them, "The cup that I drink you will drink, and with the baptism with which I am baptized you will be baptized. But to sit at my right hand or at my left is not mine to grant, but it is for those for whom it has been prepared." When the 10 heard this, they began to be angry with James and John. So Jesus called them and said to them, "You know that among the Gentiles, those whom they recognize as their rulers lord it over them, and their great ones are tyrants over them. But it is not so among you. Whoever wishes to become great among you must be your servant, and whoever wishes to be first among you must be slave of all. For the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many." The Gospel of the Lord. This is the 6th and final week of a series that we've been calling Next Steps, as in the next steps to a better you. And really, it's all about discipleship. See, discipleship is just about following Jesus Christ, and it's a journey. A journey that, like most journeys, is made up of simple, although not always easy, steps. These steps are not obligations. They're also not hard and fast rules. They're lifestyle choices. Choices that we think are essential to growing in a relationship with Jesus Christ, a relationship in which he can change and transform us. So STEPS, of course, is an acronym. So let's just recap them. S is about service in ministry or missions. T is about tithing and giving. E is engage, which is all about community and small groups. P is the practice of prayer and the celebration of the sacraments. And S is about sharing your faith. And that's the one we're going to be talking about today. So we're looking at the Gospel of St. Mark, which was today's Gospel. And it's important to remember that Jesus' closest followers, the 12 apostles, were following him because they thought that he would one day be king. They believed that he would lead a revolution against those hated Roman occupiers and that he would become king in their place. So Mark tells us that one day 2 of them, James and John, approached Jesus with a request, asking that when he does become king, could they please, pretty please, have positions of privilege and power in his kingdom. It's a sort of naive request, for sure. But even so, when the other apostles hear about it, they get angry and jealous because they wanted those positions of privilege and power too. Who wouldn't? So Jesus sees this infighting and these ill feelings among his followers and friends, but he doesn't let it go. He decides, rather, that he needs to tackle this situation. Now, as a side note, there is a good leadership lesson here. When you see bad feelings develop among your direct reports in your department, or your employees in your business, or your co-workers, or among friends, or even building up between your kids, don't ignore it and just hope that it'll go away. Although that's always my preferred approach. Instead, lean into it and address it as quickly as you can. That's exactly what Jesus did. He puts this issue right on the table to teach a very important lesson. Mark tells us that Jesus calls them together and says this to them. We heard it today. You know that among the Gentiles and those whom they recognize as their rulers, lord it over them, and their great ones are tyrants over them. Now the disciples are thinking, well, yeah, of course we do. That's why we want to be in charge. Because right now, we feel like we're being lorded over by the Roman authorities, by the Jewish religious leaders, and we'd like to do some lording over other people too sometime. That's simply the thinking of the day. If you had authority and power, you used it to take advantage of others for your own advantage. That's just the way it was. So what Jesus says next is a completely radical statement to his followers. He says, you know that those who are recognized as rulers lord it over them to make their authority felt. But it shall not be so among you. But it shall not be so among you. Jesus is just saying, I'm not calling you to use whatever power you enjoy in my service for yourself. Rather, whoever wishes to be great among you must be a servant. Whoever wishes to be first among you must be slave of all. Jesus explains to us that in God's eyes, the one who serves is going to be the greatest. And the one who is counted first of all will be the servant of all. Why? Well, he tells us why. He says, the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. He says that the whole reason that he came among us was not to be served, but to serve, and to be a ransom for many. Now, when we use that word ransom, we often think of like a kidnapping situation in which the kidnapper usually has some demands, and very often that's money, but it could also be something else. In Jesus' day, the word ransom was used much more widely. Actually, it was referring to something like a debt and a repayment. If you were in debt to someone in that society and you could not pay off that debt, then you would become that person's servant. You'd become their slave, and you would work to pay it off. Unless, of course, someone else stepped in and paid that debt off for you. That was the ransom. Okay? So Jesus here teaches the apostles that he has come to pay the ransom for humanity. Well, what does that mean? Well, every single person, every one of us has been born into sin. Now, being born into sin does not make you a bad person, but it does make you a slave. It means that even though there's good that we want to do, we don't do it. Even though there are bad things that you want to avoid, we don't avoid it. Sin is the reason why maybe you yell at your kids, even though you hate yelling at your kids and you feel bad about it after the fact. Sin is the reason why you don't have control over your eating habits, or your spending habits, or your drinking habits, or your anger. Sin is why we hurt the people that we love the most. The story of creation, right from the beginning, is the story about how God created the world and he created it good. It was good. He gave us everything that we needed. But at a certain point, as a human race, we turned our back on God. And therefore, sin entered the world. That story is our story. We've all let him down. I've let him down. There are moments and seasons and decisions and times in our lives where we have turned our back on God. And it wasn't a one-time deal either. It's an over and over again kind of deal. In fact, sin can be so pervasive and so persistent in our lives, in my life, that it can actually become a form of enslavement, creating a debt that we cannot pay, that was paid for me and for you by Christ on that cross. Thus, he is our ransom, right? A ransom that he pays out of love. A ransom he didn't owe, but he paid in full out of love for you and for me, and only out of love. It is a ransom that we do not deserve, we did not earn, and we could never work to pay it off. There's only one thing we can do with it: share it. See, God charges us and sends us to share this message with the whole world, with everyone. The word gospel simply means good news. And that's what we're called to share with everyone. Good news. The good news of that ransom. Now, it's true that a lot of people in the church, from time to time, have been quite effective in making the good news sound bad, or sad, or even scary. But as Jesus gave it to us, it's actually the greatest news that we could ever hear. It's the greatest news ever. It's good news that you do not have to be a slave to sin. But also good news that even when you do sin and fall and fail, there's another chance waiting for you. And another chance. And another chance. And another chance. And a fresh start just for you. Good news that you do not have to be a perfect person for God to love you. You may not be perfect, but you are perfectly loved. Good news that God loves you right now. Doesn't matter what's going on in your life, doesn't matter what you did last night. God loves you right now. And at the same time, he's calling you to more. Now, if you've got that good news and you really believe it, the one thing you just cannot do and never ever do is keep it to yourself. In fact, usually when you've got good news, you can't wait to share it, right? Like the woman who finds out she's pregnant, or the couple who becomes engaged, or the candidate who finally gets that job they've been waiting for, or gets elected to office for the first time, or the student who worked really, really hard studying for the exam and aces the test. Those are not things that you can keep to yourself. Good news has to be shared. It's just got to be shared, right? You're not meant to hoard it. You share it. But sharing the message of the gospel, sharing the message of our faith can seem challenging, and I get that, even daunting. In fact, of all of the steps we've been talking about through the entirety of this series, this is the one that is actually the most difficult one for us most of the time. And I've actually been thinking about this over the last little while, trying to come up with why that is. And I think I've nailed it down to 3 reasons. So in the time that we have left this morning, I just want to break them down with you. First, because if you grew up Catholic, there was absolutely no emphasis on this. This was not even a consideration. It's not even on the radar. So it doesn't seem very important to us. We were taught that faith is a personal thing. It is a private thing. You keep it to yourself. You don't share it with anybody. It's just between you and God, right? When you go to your friend's house for Christmas dinner or Thanksgiving dinner, we don't talk about politics and religion because we don't want to offend anybody, right? We keep it to ourselves. But friends, that's not the way it was from the beginning. The reason why Christianity exists at all four corners of the earth is because people shared their faith. They had an encounter with Jesus Christ, and they said, you know what? I want you to have an encounter too. This is good news. It's changed my life, and I know that it can change you. We're meant to share it. You're not supposed to keep it to yourself. Second reason, because I think we've seen it done badly by other people, sometimes through intrusive ways and sometimes through very offensive methods. And I'm thinking of like the sidewalk preacher holding a sign saying, turn or burn. Right? Or you're going to hell. Right? Talk about a turnoff. Right? Third reason, simply because we don't have a strategy. We don't have a strategy to approach this step. And in a culture in which religion, and specifically Christianity, has been more or less marginalized and seen as unimportant and even irrelevant, a society in which we do not talk about faith and nobody wants you to talk about faith, we need a strategy. We need a strategy or it's just simply not going to happen. Our strategy for sharing this good news, which is also called evangelization, is simple. In fact, it's dead simple. And I call it invest and invite. Invest and invite. Just think of someone. Pick a person. One person that you can think of. Maybe it's somebody in your family or your neighborhood, parents from your kid's school or lacrosse team or dance class, someone who does not have a relationship with Christ and his church. Pick a person and invest in that person. Prayerfully, conversationally, and relationally. Pray for them every day, every single day. Have a conversation with them. Good morning. How's it going? Be relational. Love them. All of us, we're all God's children. From the holiest to the biggest sinner, we are all God's children. We're called to love one another. Doesn't mean you're going to agree, but we're called to love one another. So pray, have conversations, and love them. Invest in them in those ways. And then, when the opportunity arises, and it always eventually will, invite them to church. Offer to take them, or maybe even agree to meet them here. Promise them coffee or brunch afterwards. Make it kind of an event. And you know what? Pick up the bill. Do it. Make it your treat. For our part, as a church staff, we promise and pledge to partner with you, putting time and effort into making sure your guest has a great experience when you actually get them here. And all of us can partner together to create an environment in which unchurched people are going to feel welcomed and actually become disposed to hearing the good news. All of us can do that together. That responsibility ought not fall on one set of shoulders. It is all of our responsibility. Okay? Remember that Jesus says, go out into the world and proclaim the good news. All of you, go. Not some of you, go. It is all of our responsibility. All of us can play a part in helping to make this happen. And here are some practical ways, without reinventing the wheel, that all of us can do something to make this an irresistible environment for people who are searching for more. So I'm going to break down just a few little things that I thought about. Firstly, you can park a little bit further from the doors. We have 4 parking lots here, and everybody wants to park in this lot, the one that's closest to the doors. Don't do it. Park further away. There's health benefits to that too. It's good to walk, right? It's good to get some fresh air. Here's what that does. It leaves the VIP parking for those who are coming in late and struggling to find a parking spot. It leaves those spots for people with mobility issues or young kids in strollers. Okay? Makes a world of difference. I remember growing up, when we would have company come over, my parents would say, get the cars out of the driveway so that when our guests come, they can park closer to the house. This is God's house. So we do the same. Park further away from the doors and leave those places available for our guests and those that are coming in late. Here's the next one. Scooch in from the end of the pews. Everybody loves hogging the end of the pew. I don't know why. Maybe it's because you got an armrest. I don't know. But move over. Because here's what that does. When someone's coming in late, okay, they got to step over you to get a seat. Think about this for a second. Okay, let's say you've got maybe a mom and a dad it's not their normal Sunday routine to come to church, but somebody invited them, so they got all woken up early, dressed, ready to go. You got the kids in their outfits. One kid pukes, you got to change the outfit. Like this whole thing goes on and on and on. They finally get here. They can't find a parking spot, so they're parking way around the block and struggling to get in here. They come in late. They can't get a seat. They got to step over you, and they hear, because what an inconvenience it is for you to have to move over. Right? Nothing quite says, welcome to church, like, you know what? They're never coming back. That's the reality. Right? It was a struggle for them to get here in the first place. We don't know what's going on in their life. It could be your kids or your grandkids. And maybe because you guilted them enough, they finally showed up. And then someone was cranky. And they're going to be like, you know what? That wasn't worth it. I can do a lot of other things on a Sunday. I'm never going back. Don't believe me? I've seen it. From this seat, you get a great perspective of what happens out here. Okay? They see the eye rolls and they hear the sigh. Don't do it. Move over. Scooch right over. Okay? Sit closer to the front. Why are you laughing? Huh? You want to go to a Leafs game, you sit at the front. He's way more important than Austin Matthews. This is Jesus. Move up. Then when someone late comes in, they don't have to walk all the way up to the front and take the front rows and almost feel like they have to do the walk of shame and everybody's looking at them. Don't do it. Don't do it. Simple things. These are so simple things. You can all do that. Here's the one that I think is the easiest. Smile. Smile. If you're happy to be here, if you believe in the message of the good news, if you believe in Jesus Christ's saving victory over death for you, then let your face show it. I remember someone once said, "Are you happy?" Like, well, yeah. Well, tell it to your face. Right? We were actually made to smile. God created us to smile. It is so much easier to smile than it is to frown and pout. So smile. I'll tell you, here's the other thing a smile does. A smile diffuses tension. Sometimes when people come into my office to meet with me over whatever's going on in their life, sometimes very difficult things that they're just heartbroken about, things that are going on in their family, they're grieving a loss, I don't know. I go through in a day what people go through in a lifetime. Sometimes I have to force myself to smile when they're all worked up. And you just watch what that does. It absolutely diffuses the stress and the anger and the tension. It also shows that we care. Smile. Greet people warmly. Be happy. This is good news. This is the best news ever. It shall not be an opportunity for doom and gloom. We should be happy to celebrate this. All of us can smile and greet people warmly. Thus endeth my rant. But you know, it's important to talk about these things once in a while. It's a good refresher and a reminder that we're all God's children. And we all come here with only God knows what baggage and what is deep in our heart. And we're all just trying to make sense of things. So why not make this an amazing environment for you and for everyone that's in the same boat? It just makes sense. Sharing your faith is essential to discipleship. And really, that's all we've been talking about these past few weeks. Following the Lord, striving for being a good disciple, step by step on the path to greatness. A little bit more today than yesterday. A little bit more tomorrow than today. And in the process, discovering a more successful and greater way to live. May God bless you all.